car crashes, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis, Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts with the attorneys of Hollis, Wright.
Welcome. You are watching The Attorneys. I'm Art Franklin. And our topic is capital murder and death penalty in Alabama. It is a state with one of the highest per capita rates of death sentences in the nation. We're going to get into that topic and dwell deep into that topic. But I want to remind you as we get started that attorneys at Hollis, Wright, they're manning the phones right now. Whenever we start the show, they start manning the phones so they can take your questions. Those questions are free, it's confidential, and they'll answer that call right now at 1-844-LAW-TALK. That's 1-844-LAW-TALK, as we are talking about death penalty and capital murder.
All right, how are you?
I'm good. Good to see you. It's been a minute.
It has. We got an important topic tonight, and it's one of those topics that you need an expert on, right? Mm-hmm. Because even within the subset of criminal law, capital punishment and death penalty eligible cases, both from the prosecution side and from the criminal defense side, require a certain amount of level of experience, knowledge, and how to navigate and handle those. And that's, luckily, we've got Derek Collins here, who's a criminal defense attorney local here in Birmingham that has a lot of experience with it. Welcome to the show.
Thank you all. Thank you all for having me.
Before we get into it, kind of give us your background, what you do day to day, and how you help people here in Birmingham and the surrounding area.
Yes. I started practicing in 1999, which is a little over 25 years. And luckily, I started off, I think, 4 months after I passed the bar. I ended up with one of Birmingham's most high-profile capital murder/death penalty case. It was Jeremy Hart, State of Alabama versus Jeremy Hart, which was a double murder. And I've been doing it for 25 years now. So I always say capital murder, death penalty cases, they chose me because I got the case while being in court. And I'm in court with a bunch of older, white-headed attorneys. And Jeremy Hart's mother came to me and said that she wanted me to represent her son. And I couldn't understand it because I said, well, I'm the youngest thing in here. I'm only 4 months out, and I told her that. But she told me that God had told her to come and that she wanted me to represent her son, and I did.
Well, that is a calling in the moment, certainly for if you've only been out of law school that short period of time. Well, let's do this. We've all heard the phrase capital murder and what a capital offense is, but just generally from a legal standpoint, give us an overview of what that means when someone says that it's a capital murder crime.
Okay. Capital murder, let's define capital murder. In order for you to have a capital murder case, you must first have a murder. Okay, that's self-defining.
Yeah, it seems simple.
So a murder is a killing of a human being, intentional killing of a human being. Now, what makes it capital as opposed to maybe just a regular murder case would be aggravating circumstances. And usually those aggravating circumstances are in connection with the actual murder. Say, for instance, murdering someone in the course of a robbery. The robbery is the aggravating circumstances, or aggravating circumstance that goes along with that robbery. Murder in the course of a kidnapping, first degree. These all have to be serious underlying crimes. Murder in the course of an arson. So, but you have also capital charges such as murder by killing 2 or more people in one common plan or scheme. Okay. So you have murder for hire. So it's a murder that has to have aggravating circumstances associated with it.
So we're talking capital murder and also death penalty. Derek, if you would, give us an overview of how the death penalty is applied here in Alabama.
Yes. Now, if you have a capital murder case, that doesn't mean that it's death penalty eligible. There are certain cases such as shooting a person from a car or into a car. Those have been deemed by the legislature to not have aggravating factors. So if you're charged with a capital murder charge of shooting someone in a vehicle, then you would only be looking at life without. Now, capital murder charges carry 2 possible sentences. If you're convicted, you carry 2 possible sentences. One is life without parole, which is your natural life in prison. And the second one is, of course, death. Now, when you're dealing with a capital case that's death penalty eligible, then it brings on a whole nother aspect of the case, whereas if you're only looking at life without parole, then it doesn't bring in the harshest sentence, which is death. So capital murder in the course of a robbery, death penalty eligible. Capital murder in the course of a kidnapping, and these are first, second degree underlying kidnappings and robberies, you're looking at the death penalty. Murder for hire, you're looking at the death penalty. So I would say most of your capital charges have a possibility of death penalty as the punishment. Now, it's the DA, the state of Alabama, that represents the state of Alabama. They're the ones who decides whether a case is death eligible. They make that decision because they could announce to the court that we're not seeking the death penalty, although it's a death penalty eligible case. I mean, that's rarely done, but that can be done. They have that discretion.
Now, let me ask you this, because you keep referring to or saying the phrase death penalty eligible, which would imply that there's another alternative to the death penalty, which I think you explained would be life without parole.
Yes.
But if the DA decides how to prosecute the crime, meaning whether or not they're going to proceed with the death penalty, seeking the death penalty or not, how do they ultimately decide after the case, we're going with the death penalty or we're going without life parole? Obviously, that's not the DA that makes that decision.
As far as before it's charged, correct?
Oh, no, I'm saying after you're convicted, how do they determine whether or not a death penalty eligible case is actually going to end with the death penalty or the sentence will be life without parole?
At that point, the district attorney has already declared that they're seeking the death penalty, of course, and then at this point, a jury has found you guilty of a capital murder offense. Now comes that phase, which is the penalty phase. You have the guilt phase and the penalty phase. And in the penalty phase, you go through a case where you present mitigation evidence, and you hire a mitigation expert, and you can hire all type of psychologists. Any need that needs to be addressed about the defendant that would shed light to the jury on what type of person he is, then you're eligible to hire an expert or present that as evidence. The first thing, you're going to have a mitigation expert who's going to put together an investigation that paints a picture of the defendant's life story. Of course, a good life story, and all of the good things that he's done to put before a jury, so a jury can make a determination of whether this person should receive the death penalty or life without parole as the sentence.
Makes sense.
All right, we're going to take a break right here. We got much more to talk about as we're talking about capital murder and death penalty. I also want to remind you, as you look at your screen, you see a QR code on that screen. That is yet another way for you to reach an attorney at Hollis Wright. You can scan that QR code and you can reach Hollis right there. Also, you can give us a call at 1-844-LAW-TALK. That's 1-844-LAW-TALK. An attorney is standing by right now to take your calls throughout this show, and they'll answer that question. It is a free, confidential call. We're talking death penalty and capital murder. We'll take a break. We'll be back with our special guest, Derek Collins, when we come back.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis Wright, a personal injury law firm, and thank you for watching The Attorneys. We hope you, a friend, or a loved one never needs legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of the show is simple: to provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Your call to the show is free and off air. So if you have questions specific to the show or related to other accident or injury topics, call, email, or text us. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, or go to hollis-wright.com and click on the Contact Us button. We know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us and watching The Attorneys.
The Attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis Wright, are here to serve you.
When we started the show in 2011, my goal was to do what our firm does best. Help people answer questions related to real-world legal issues they have in their lives in a way that's not intimidating to talk with a lawyer. If the issue is important to you, it's equally important to us, and we're ready to talk with you at no cost.
Yeah, oftentimes people are confronting various legal issues in their lives that really run the gamut of a lot of different legal practice areas such as bankruptcy, criminal law, civil law such as personal injury, divorces, domestic relations. And to be able to have a show once a week that covers those practice areas and answers people's questions in those areas, that's really the main objective of the show.
We use the resources of the many lawyers at our law firm to create a plan that has a lasting impact for each person that calls or texts. And we also give back to the community at the same time. We are here to serve you, the viewer, each week on The Attorneys.
You see us each Sunday night on The Attorneys, but remember, our attorneys are here all week long to help you with your personal injury claim.
Our attorneys are standing by right now to give you a free consultation at Hollis Wright. Your result matters.
I want to welcome you back. You are watching The Attorneys, and our topic today is capital murder and death penalty. Before we get started, I want to get one of the viewer questions in. We really appreciate hearing from you guys when you contact us and talk about what our topic is. And this topic, as we come back here, is should the defendant, prior to or after arrest, cooperate with law enforcement during their investigation of the charge? Our special guest is Derek Hollis. What do you say?
No. Emphatically no. And this goes for not only capital murder cases, but all cases. Of course, with capital murder punishment being more severe, this is more critical than ever. Now, you should not cooperate. The system is that you're not to be a witness against yourself, or the government can't compel you to self-incriminate yourself. So your first thing should be, I want to see a lawyer, and that's it. That's the only statement that you should ever make when being investigated, specifically for a capital murder. Now, the only exception I would give it is if you were maybe out of the country and you've got someone like maybe Taylor Swift as a witness, that's an alibi witness for you, then yeah, you cooperate. But, even then I wouldn't do it. But, I mean, if push come to shove and you had to make a statement, it would be under those circumstances that I would do it.
Let me ask you this. So in that same vein, if you are in a situation or someone's in a situation where they find themselves, where they're being charged and held for allegations that, whether it's a murder or a capital murder, but specifically with a capital murder, we always hear about people bonding out of jail. In a capital case where, with those aggravating factors and it being a violent crime, do people charged with capital murder have a right to bond out of jail?
No, they do not. That is a constitutional fact that basically, due to the aggravating circumstances, the nature of the charge, a person can be held without consideration of bond. It is one of the only charges where a judge does not have to consider anything but the fact that you have been charged with capital murder. Now, a judge can consider facts that he feels are mitigating and give you a bond, and facts such as a fact that would maybe consider the case to be a lesser included charge than a capital murder, like maybe manslaughter. So if a judge feels, and sometimes and usually this happens after a preliminary hearing where a judge has had an opportunity to hear the evidence, hear the witnesses, and determine whether the state is able to prove a capital murder charge. And if the state of Alabama has a, say weak case or a case that's not really good, then a judge could say, hey, well, I don't feel like you've met the burden of proving at preliminary hearing under a probable cause analysis, which is more probable than not. I don't feel like you've met that burden. I think it's more of a manslaughter case. He could reduce it to a manslaughter, or he could say, hey, I'm going to keep it out of capital murder charge, but I'm going to give him a bond. So it's up to the judge, but the judge, he can stand on the charge alone and say no bond.
You know, Derek, I was wondering if you can share with us some notable cases where capital murder was a wrongful conviction and capital murder was initially the charge on it.
Well, I put in my notes some statewide. I'm sure there are some local ones, but some statewide ones are Walter McMillan, who was sentenced to death in 1988 despite the jury's recommendation for a life sentence. Mm-hmm. And this was an investigation by 60 Minutes that uncovered prosecutorial misconduct and perjury by witnesses, and McMillan was released from prison in 1993. So there's a person, if it weren't for 60 Minutes, would be dead, or could be, looking at death, or so.
What about the Ray Hinton case? Was that another one?
Yes, in 2015, after spending 30 years on death row. I can imagine just being on death row is enough to kill you, but he was sentenced to death by a court in 1985 for murders of 2 fast food restaurant managers after a 10-2 recommendation of death by the jury. And the prosecutor had a documented history of racial biases, and that's prevalent in prevalent in capital murder cases, and basically stated that Hinton was guilty and was evil. And in 2002, 3 leading firearms examiners testified that the bullets used in the murders could not be matched to Hinton's gun and may not have come from a single gun at all.
He's a person that I actually interviewed right after he was released, after being wrongly convicted. So I know these things happen, but that's why it's so important for us to have experts on to talk about this.
Absolutely, and I always, when I was in law school, for sure, you would have people come by and speak from the Innocence Project and things like that. Obviously, DNA evidence has played a crucial role with these convictions prior to there being DNA evidence, or having the ability to exonerate someone by use of DNA evidence. Tell me this, so you just said that he was on death row for 30 years before he was released. What is the process from a legal standpoint that you're going through after that death penalty conviction? Is it treated the same as any other criminal conviction?
Well, I do more trial capital work. There's post-conviction relief lawyers that handle appeals. Now, I do appeals, but I don't like to do any of my appeals, cases that I've tried. I don't like to appeal the cases that I've tried. I like fresh eyes on it. But
I'm the same way on the civil side. I'll take it to the trial, and then you let those real smart lawyers that know how to do the appeal work. But that's just a good point, just to show how within the framework of criminal law, which is complicated enough, now you have the capital murder and the death penalty aspect of it, that there's even another subset to that in terms of the appeals and the post-trial relief, that just goes to show just how complex this is, that obviously, hopefully nobody's ever in this situation, but if you are, this is the kind of person on the front end that you need, and then there's specialists on the back end that you need if things don't go well.
Which I do appellate work as well. On the appellate side, you have a conviction. Okay, let's just say you have a death penalty conviction. Okay, from that point on, it's all paperwork. It's all based on what happened at the trial and the transcripts from the recording of the trial. And then it's finding legal issues or flaws or defects in the process that affects a person's substantial or constitutional rights. Right. Now there's been a critical change based on that here recently, where beforehand, if you were representing a defendant, death-eligible defendant in the trial court, you didn't have to so much concentrate on reserving issue for appeal. Because the Supreme Court would automatically, these cases, if you receive a death penalty case, it goes directly to the Alabama Supreme Court.
Yep.
And the Alabama Supreme Court would go back over the case, which is what they call de novo, which means anew. And so they would go back over the entire case and search the record for anything that is a issue or a defect that could affect a defendant's substantial or constitutional rights.
Put a pin on it right there, Derek, and we can bring that back up after we go to break. We're going to take a break right here. We've got our last segment. You can still reach an attorney at Hollis Wright. 1-844-LAW-TALK, free confidential call. Call them right now. We'll be back to wrap this up as we're talking about capital murder and death penalty. Stay with us.
Thank you for watching The Attorneys each Sunday night, where we come to your living room to provide free legal advice in a confidential, off-air setting. Unfortunately, with the number of calls, texts, and emails that come in during the show, we can't always get to everything. But know this, Hollis Wright is open all week long. You call us at 844-LAW-TALK and we're going to answer your question for free. Thank you for watching The Attorneys, and we look forward to seeing you and talking to you soon. At Hollis Wright, we don't make empty promises. So here's a promise you can bank on. If you've been injured in an accident and want tough, aggressive, and relentless representation that wins a lot, you'll get it at Hollis Wright, where your result matters.
Welcome back. You are watching The Attorneys, and we're talking about capital murder and the death penalty. And our special guest, Derek Collins, when we left going to commercial break, you were talking about the Supreme Court and a change there.
Yes, as recently as 2023, which is last year, the Alabama Supreme Court eliminated automatic plain error review for trial errors in death penalty cases. The court will no longer be required to read capital case transcripts to see if there are any errors that may have adversely impacted the rights of a capital defendant. Now, that means that a trial lawyer didn't have to concentrate so much of preserving error, because there are three things that are going on with the trial lawyer. You're dealing with the law with the opposing counsel and the judge. You're dealing with the factual scenarios with a jury. And then you're also required to preserve error for appellate review, because if you don't preserve it, then the Supreme Court won't review it. And before 2023, the Supreme Court would go over the entire case to make sure there were no errors, which I think is the right thing to do. Now, like all other cases, capital trial attorneys are vested with coming up with every error, and when I say error, objecting, saying I object to this, I object to that, preserving an error where the Supreme Court, once the transcripts go to the Supreme Court, they look at it and said, okay, he gave notice to the trial court of this error, and the trial court ruled against him. So now we get a chance to look at it and see if that he ruled correctly.
Good.
Yeah, Derek, when I think about murder in terms of probably what most of our viewers and even myself, and I'm married to a prosecutor, most of my experience with this is Scott and Lacey Peterson or Casey Anthony, or recently the Murdaugh trial up in South Carolina, where the media was all over it. Obviously, not every capital murder case is going to get the coverage that Casey Anthony got, but does the media, by and large, play any role when you get a case that is a death-eligible case?
Of course it does. Now, if all capital murder cases are serious, even life without parole capital murder cases, definitely death penalty cases. Now, if you happen to get a case that is not as highly publicized, it takes a load off of you, because the biggest thing about it is that you're not having to deal with jury contamination. Right. Now, as opposed to a case where you have high-profile media, the Lacey case, things of that nature,
Yeah, I think in
Laci
OJ they had
Peterson
to they had to take the jury completely away and hide him away in a hotel.
Sequestration. Yeah. So yes, that could happen. But it's mainly the jury that is affected by the media. Now, you get a high-profile case, and now I don't have anything against the media. I believe in the First Amendment and the media's rights to the First Amendment, but I think it needs to be looked at on the effect it plays on impeding upon a defendant's constitutional rights to a fair and impartial jury. Now, when you get the media involved, they're usually gonna spin the case, I guess for their viewership, or and I'm not saying that they don't search for the truth, but I think the media has a bias in how they present the case, and it tends to be more toward the government or the state. And so when you bring out the media and bring out all of these bad things and all of these gross and heinous things that these defendants have allegedly committed, you've already tainted the jury with the mindset that he's guilty, or tainted their mind that this is so gross that someone has to pay for it. Right. And so this goes on for a long time, because this process of getting to a jury trial could be 1, 2, 3 years down the road. So when you have that process, you've had a jury, the jury that gets there, the potential jurors, contaminated for years, 2 and 3 years of hearing nothing but the bad things this guy has done.
Yeah, and I ask because I can only imagine, because even in our cases, our judges have to say, don't Google things, don't go look up the laws on this. And they, jurors still do it. So I can imagine in a high-profile case that would be a difficult hurdle to overcome.
As someone who spent 38 years in the media, I'd like to believe that the media is probably not biased one way or another. It's certainly high-profile cases can be very sensitive and lean toward the victim more than anything else. But I think that they're doing the same thing that lawyers are trying to do. You're searching for truth, and you're searching for fairness as well, and that's what they're trying to do. But they're also, many times, they're listening to you attorneys, in terms of how they go about their stories.
Well, especially a situation in a capital murder case I'm on now that I won't mention, and for this reason, that you get a case where a judge puts a gag order on the defendant's attorney. Mm-hmm. Not that you want to make any statements, but sometimes you may have to come out and neutralize things. Right. And when a judge puts a gag order on you, then they only hear one side of the story, and that's mostly what the state has presented via the media.
That's why you have the attorneys, right?
That's right.
Yep. Derek Collins, so much. We really do appreciate you coming on and talking with us about capital murder and death penalty. We certainly learned a lot. Thanks a lot for being with us. Also want to thank you for joining us each week as we give you this type of information that matters to you and matters to your life. Make sure you join us again. We'll be back here, same place, same time, talking about a new topic, but always giving you what you need. This has been another episode of The Attorneys. We'll see you back here again next week.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis Wright.